Childhood photos of a life before landing in Canada. These bring back memories for Victoria Flores of all the time she spent as a little girl with the Indigenous peoples of Bolivia. She is part Indigenous herself, and when she immigrated to Regina at age 16, she was troubled to hear the way people talked about Indigenous people here.
I hadn't even met an Indigenous person at that point, but I just heard so many awful things, and I was annoyed because, again, I saw similar things back home where people would just stereotype Indigenous people in different ways because the history is different. Here is a picture of myself.
In high school in Regina, Flores threw herself into learning about equality, and she thought about Indigenous peoples here versus back in Bolivia.
The history of Indigenous people in Bolivia, there was a lot of awful things done through colonization, but it wasn't like here where people were taken from their families and culture was stripped and they were forced to be away from their parents and all these things that give you this sense of identity.
Before Fian Lam moved to Regina from Hong Kong last year, she took an online course to learn about Indigenous people in Canada. She says she relates to the desire to reclaim a native language.
Like, even I am Chinese, but my mother language is Cantonese. Yes, and I think after I come to Canada, I realized that self-identity is really important. I want my children also know Chinese.
It's part of my responsibility to not only know and understand the history, but also be able to contribute to a better community.
Both Lam and Flores want to learn more about truth and reconciliation efforts. Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News, Regina.